Racist Karen calls. The cops on black woman unaware. She is FBI chief. Karma hit hard. In a quiet suburb outside Arlington, Virginia, a seemingly ordinary confrontation is about to explode into a life-altering showdown. Our story begins with an unassuming grocery store parking lot and two women whose worlds couldn't be more different. One is a comfortable suburbanite named Karen, who believes she has every right to police her surroundings, even when nobody asked her to. The other is Amara Thompson, a poised, high-ranking FBI official who's just trying to pick up a few items before heading home. Neither suspects the collision course fate has set for them. But by day's end, reputations will be shattered, secrets unveiled, and karma will strike with unforgettable precision. Karen Samuels considered herself the unofficial overseer of her suburban neighborhood, located a mere 30 minutes from downtown Washington, D.C. She had moved to this well-manicured enclave 8 years ago when her husband, Brad, secured a middle management position at a reputable software company. For Karen, the jump from a two-bedroom apartment in a congested part of the city to a spacious detached home on a tree-lined street felt like a dream come true. Those who knew Karen, however, realized she was not merely a mild-mannered housewife. With her carefully color-coordinated outfits, meticulously styled blonde bob, and an ever-present phone clutched in her hand, she prided herself on being the neighborhood watchdog. Her suspicious eyes were always scanning for anything or anyone she deemed out of place. The local homeowners association had even politely asked her to back down on multiple occasions. Her frequent calls to local authorities had become something of a nuisance. Yet Karen was unshakable in her belief that her vigilance was necessary. Her daily routine involved walking her two lapdogs, Winston and Duchess, around the development's landscaped parks, greeting the neighbors who looked like her and coolly assessing those who didn't. She'd never say so outright, at least not to most people, but she had strong opinions about outsiders. Anyone not fitting her suburban ideal was immediately suspect. Her husband, Brad, kept his head down. He worked long hours, came home exhausted, and had learned to coexist with Karen's intense personality. When Karen ranted about people who didn't belong, Brad would nod vaguely, focusing on the sports highlights on TV. Their marriage was more a partnership of convenience than a union of deep emotional intimacy. He had accepted Karen's flaws as part of the deal. On good days, Karen's controlling nature was overshadowed by her efficiency. She made sure all bills were paid, the house was immaculate, and dinner was prepared like clockwork. On bad days, her bigotry and hair-trigger temper created friction between them or with the unlucky neighbors, or, more recently, any unsuspecting person who caught her disapproving glance. Despite numerous warnings from local police and stern discussions at the homeowners association meetings, Karen saw herself as defending what was rightfully hers. She was, in her mind, a champion of law and order, a sentinel against perceived threats. And that unwavering self-righteousness set the stage for the explosive event that would soon unfold. If only she knew just how badly she was about to misjudge her target, and how thoroughly her life was about to be turned upside down. Special Agent in charge Amara Thompson had been promoted to this elite position in the FBI just 2 months earlier. Stationed at the J. Edgar Hoover building in Washington, D.C., she oversaw critical cases ranging from cybercrime to domestic terrorism. She was also a frequent guest speaker at the FBI Academy in Quantico, where she'd instruct trainees on interrogation techniques, crisis negotiation, and leadership in high-stakes operations. Amara's rise through the ranks had been anything but easy. She was raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to support her and her younger sister, Jade. Amara's childhood community was often overlooked by the city, plagued with underfunded schools and scarce resources. Rather than being beaten down by her environment, Amara used it as motivation. She excelled academically, earning scholarships and eventually a degree in criminal justice from Howard University, a real-life institution known for its legacy of excellence in educating black scholars. After Howard, she aced the FBI entrance exam and began a career that quickly demonstrated her intelligence, poise, and dedication to protecting communities, including those that society frequently marginalized. Throughout her career, Amara had faced countless moments of discrimination, from subtle slights to blatant prejudice. Sometimes it came in the form of condescending remarks from fellow agents who assumed she'd landed her role through diversity quotas. Other times, it manifested in the reluctance of certain local law enforcement partners to accept directives from a black woman. Amara had developed a thick skin. She stood up for herself and for others facing injustice. But she also learned to channel her anger into forging stronger alliances and delivering impeccable results. By always being 3 steps ahead, she turned skeptics into supporters, or, at least, forced them to respect her results. On an unremarkable Saturday morning, Amara found herself with a rare window of free time. She decided to pay a surprise visit to her mother in Arlington, just a short drive from her office. Her mother, Sharon, was recovering from minor knee surgery and had been complaining about running low on groceries and supplies. Amara offered to handle the errands, never imagining that a simple trip to the local supermarket parking lot would ignite a confrontation that would test not only her composure but also her faith in the system she worked so diligently to uphold. It was around 11:00 a.m. when Amara pulled her sleek, black SUV into the parking lot of the Fresh Mart, a popular grocery store in the Arlington suburbs. She stepped out of her vehicle, wearing casual weekend clothes, jeans, a fitted T-shirt, and athletic shoes. Her FBI badge and firearm were hidden in the locked glove compartment, as she was officially off duty. She considered carrying the badge on her belt, as she usually did, but she was just running errands. No need, she thought. It was supposed to be a quick in-and-out trip. The day was hot, the asphalt shimmering under the sun. Amara scanned the parking area, noticing how busy it was, families loading groceries into their cars, an elderly couple trying to maneuver a heavy cart, and a few teens chatting at the store's entrance. She thought about offering to help the elderly couple, but hesitated, wanting to get the groceries and head back to her mum's place before her mother tried hobbling off the couch to do it herself. Karen Samuels pulled up 2 rows away in her spotless white sedan, humming to herself as she mentally checked off her day's to-do list. She was on her way to pick up Winston and Duchess from the groomer when she realized she needed some last-minute items for a bake sale. She had an eagle eye for the parking lot as she turned into a space near the entrance. Immediately, her gaze fell upon Amara, an unfamiliar face, or so Karen assumed. Karen scrutinized the black SUV with tinted windows. Something about it ignited Karen's suspicion. It was too fancy, she thought, and tinted windows were always suspicious in her mind. She had no idea who the driver was, but it only took a single glance at Amara's skin color and confident demeanor to set Karen's alarms ringing. Amara, sensing eyes on her, glanced over. She met Karen's stare. Karen instantly shifted her gaze away, fiddling with her phone. Amara sighed. She was used to that reaction, and, truthfully, she was too tired to be annoyed. People would look. They often did. She had bigger things to focus on than random stares from strangers in a parking lot. Inside the Fresh Mart, the cool blast of air conditioning was a welcome relief from the heat. Amara quickly navigated the aisles, picking up fresh produce, some frozen meals her mother liked, and a few bouquets of flowers. Karen trailed behind at a distance, stopping occasionally to examine a can of soup or box of cereal, though her real focus remained on Amara. Something about Amara's confident posture and purposeful stride fueled Karen's paranoia. Karen was looking for a sign of wrongdoing, but all she saw was a woman calmly collecting groceries. She might have let it go if not for a strange sense of entitlement that flared up whenever she saw someone she had already deemed out of place. Consciously or not, Karen wanted a reason, any reason, to feel justified in her suspicion. When Amara reached the self-checkout station, Karen positioned herself at an adjacent register. She watched as Amara scanned her items, bagged them, and slid out her credit card to pay. Karen strained her neck, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of something that would confirm her biases. Yet, nothing was out of order. Amara finished checking out, and Karen hurried to pay for her own items. Clutching her bags, Karen made sure to exit close behind. Outside, the hot sun felt almost blinding. Amara walked briskly across the lot, pressing the unlock button on her key fob. Karen followed, narrowing her eyes as she saw Amara place her groceries inside the SUV's trunk. If Amara noticed she was being followed, she gave no sign. She slipped into the driver's seat, started the engine, and began to back out when Karen made her move. Suddenly, Karen stepped behind the SUV, waving her hands dramatically. Alarmed, Amara hit the brakes. She rolled down her window. "Are you all right?" she asked, her tone more puzzled than irritated. Karen marched up to the driver's side. "Yes, I'm fine, but are you trying to run me over?" she demanded, an accusatory edge in her voice. "I'm sorry, I didn't see you." "You appeared out of nowhere," Amara replied, eyebrows knitted in confusion. She had been checking her rearview camera. There had been no one there a second ago. "Don't act like you weren't about to speed off," Karen snapped. Amara took a deep breath. "Ma'am, I'm simply leaving the parking space. Is there an issue?" Karen planted her hands on her hips, scanning the interior of Amara's car with hawk-like intensity. "What's your name?" Amara's patience was wearing thin, but she kept her voice even. "I don't see why I need to give you my name. I'm just trying to go about my day." Karen's cheeks flushed, but she gave a tight smile. "I'm just asking because we've had issues in the neighborhood before. People who come in do suspicious things." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious like buying groceries?" Karen's mouth opened, then shut. Realizing how absurd she sounded, she pivoted. "Look, I'm just concerned about safety. This parking lot has had break-ins. Forgive me for being cautious." Amara exhaled slowly. She didn't want a confrontation. She simply wanted to take care of her mother's errands. "All right. Have a good day." She rolled up the window and began to inch her SUV backward. Karen wasn't done. She stood off to the side now, glaring daggers as Amara pulled away. A small part of Karen recognized she looked irrational, but another part of her refused to let it go. How dare this stranger dismiss her so casually? Anger burned in Karen's chest, mingled with fear, though fear of what she couldn't articulate. She didn't realize she'd be crossing paths with Amara again, much sooner than she could have imagined. Later that day, Karen was sitting in her living room, scrolling through local community social media pages, places where residents reported anything from lost pets to suspicious individuals. Her mind kept drifting back to the encounter in the parking lot. She typed up a dramatic post. "Heads up, neighbors just had a very unsettling experience at Freshmart. A woman in a black SUV with tinted windows nearly ran me over. She was very hostile when I approached her. I'm not naming names, but let's stay vigilant." Almost instantly, the post garnered reactions, some supportive, some skeptical. One neighbor asked if Karen got the license plate number. Another advised calling the police. Buoyed by the encouragement, Karen felt validated. She typed in the partial plate number she remembered, or thought she remembered, and pressed enter. At the same time, Amara was dropping off groceries at her mother's home, a modest but cozy single-story house. Sharon Thompson, bandaged leg propped up on pillows, looked at her daughter with concern. "You seem stressed, honey." Amara told her about the bizarre exchange in the parking lot. Sharon shook her head, sighing, "People like that are everywhere, baby. Don't let them rob you of your peace." Amara nodded. "I know, Mum. I'm used to it. Still, sometimes I just get so tired." Sharon, with her leg elevated, gave her daughter a warm smile. "You've come so far. You handle bigger crises every day. Don't let this overshadow how proud you make me." Amara felt a surge of gratitude. She leaned in and kissed her mother's forehead. "I won't." But she couldn't shake the tension. Something about the woman's stare clung to her. She decided the best approach was to let it go. It was just another day in a lifetime of dealing with biased assumptions. That evening, Karen hosted a small dinner get-together for a few friends from the neighborhood. Seated around her exquisitely decorated table were Lisa, a realtor, and Margot, a teacher, along with their spouses. The conversation meandered through local gossip, from a new family that had just moved into the upcoming 5K charity run. Inevitably, Karen mentioned her brush with danger at Freshmart, dramatizing every detail: the black SUV, the tinted windows, the near collision she believed had been intentional. She omitted any mention of her own abrupt appearance behind the vehicle. As Karen spoke, she exaggerated the woman's aggressive demeanor, leaving out the parts where she herself had escalated the confrontation. Margot raised an eyebrow. "Well, did she threaten you?" Karen paused. She didn't need to say anything threatening. It was her attitude, you know. She looked me up and down like I was nothing. Brad, who was used to Karen's overblown narratives, felt uncomfortable. He tried to steer the conversation to safer ground. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Those backup cameras sometimes have blind spots. Karen shot him a glare. "I know what I saw, and I know how people act when they're up to no good." Lisa chimed in. "Did you happen to see the license plate?" Karen nodded, launching into how she'd already posted partial details on a community watch forum. Someone suggested I file a report, just in case. As the evening wore on, Karen's friends were too polite or too conflict-averse to question her further. But in the back of everyone's mind lingered the sense that Karen had overreacted. After all, no actual crime had been committed, except maybe stepping too close behind a reversing vehicle. Karen, however, felt vindicated by her small circle's tolerance. She misread their politeness for agreement. She went to bed that night, convinced she was right. She was doing her civic duty. The fact that the woman happened to be black only solidified Karen's misguided sense of threat, a prejudice she wouldn't openly admit, yet which guided her every interaction. Little did Karen know that the woman she had profiled so casually wasn't just anybody. The next time their paths crossed, Karen's illusions of authority would be shattered in a way that would reverberate through the neighborhood and beyond. 2 days later, Amara found herself back in Arlington on official business. She was assisting local law enforcement with a high-priority briefing related to a cyber-terrorism threat. The meeting was held at a local police precinct, part of a collaborative task force. Attending was Lieutenant Mario Delgado of the Arlington Police, who had known Amara for years. They shared mutual respect and an easy rapport. After the briefing, Delgado turned to Amara with a grin. "Hey, next time you're in town, dinner's on me." "It's good to have the FBI so hands-on," Amara chuckled. "I'll hold you to that. Maybe next week." They exchanged pleasantries, and Amara left. She decided to swing by a nearby cafe for a quick lunch before returning to her mother's place to check on her. Parking her SUV on the street, she walked to Bean Haven, a cozy coffee shop known for its fair trade brews. The shop was conveniently located near a row of boutique stores, one of which was the pet groomer Karen frequented. Inside Bean Haven, Amara ordered an iced latte and a turkey sandwich, intending to eat quickly. She took a seat by the window, enjoying the cafe's calm atmosphere. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating the wooden tables, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. Relaxed, she scrolled through her phone, scanning urgent emails from the bureau. That's when she noticed a familiar white sedan pulling up across the street. Karen stepped out, her two freshly groomed lapdogs in tow. She tied their leashes to a small post outside a boutique. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to the black SUV parked along the curb. A chill of recognition ran through her. It looked eerily similar to the vehicle from the Freshmart incident. Curiosity flared, along with righteous indignation. She decided to investigate. Amara, still unaware of Karen's presence, sipped her latte. A short while later, Karen ducked into the cafe, scanning the patrons. The moment her eyes landed on Amara, it was as if a spark had ignited a powder keg. Karen set her jaw, marched over, and stood glaring down at Amara. "You again," she hissed. Amara looked up, startled. Then recognition dawned on her. "Oh, hi," she said, her tone cool but polite. Karen's voice quivered with a mixture of anger and resolve. "I knew I'd see you again. You're lurking around here too?" Amara couldn't believe this was happening. She closed the email on her phone and placed it on the table. "Ma'am, I'm not lurking. I'm having lunch." Karen folded her arms, eyes flicking to the laptop bag at Amara's feet. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here after nearly running me over." A hush fell in the immediate vicinity as other customers began to notice the confrontation. Amara remained seated, her posture stiffening. She didn't want to cause a scene, especially when she had no desire to broadcast her FBI credentials to random cafe patrons. Taking a measured breath, Amara responded, "I'm sorry, but it sounds like you're still upset about the parking lot." That was unintentional. Karen's lip curled. "Unintentional? I've been talking to the police about you. They're looking for a black SUV that matches yours." Amara blinked, surprised at the extent of Karen's delusion. "I'm sure the police have more important things to worry about than a misunderstanding in a grocery store parking lot." Karen's voice rose in pitch. "Misunderstanding? You're a threat, and I won't stand for it in my neighborhood." She grabbed her phone, brandishing it like a weapon. "I'm calling the cops again. This time, let's see you try to sweet-talk your way out." Amara's jaw tightened. She glanced around, noticing how all eyes were on them. She felt a pang of dread. A public spectacle would not only be embarrassing, but could complicate her professional standing. She envisioned the headlines if this turned into a bigger story: FBI chief in dispute with local resident. Yet, she also recognized she had every right to stand up for herself. Carefully, she rose from her chair. "Do what you have to do," Amara said, meeting Karen's stare evenly. But inside, her heart pounded with the mix of frustration and caution. An altercation, especially with a racist undertone, could escalate in dangerous ways. She mentally prepared herself for the worst. Karen, phone in hand, began dialing. "Yes, 911? I'm at Bean Haven on Maple Street, and there's a woman here threatening me." She threw Amara a triumphant glare, as if victory was assured. Amara shook her head in disbelief. She stood still, arms at her sides, making no moves that could be construed as aggressive. The cafe manager, an older man with a concerned expression, hovered near the register, unsure of whether to intervene. Customers whispered among themselves, some obviously troubled by what they were witnessing, others stepping back to film with their phones. In that suspended moment, Amara realized that stepping away might be misread as guilt. So she remained, letting the weight of Karen's call bear down. With the phone pressed to her ear, Karen repeated, "Yes, she's a tall African-American woman, dark hair, wearing a navy blue blazer and jeans. She tried to run me over 2 days ago, and now she's here, harassing me. Please come quickly." Karen ended the call and smirked at Amara. They're on their way. Amara merely sighed. She reached into her pocket, producing her own phone. She scrolled to a number labeled Lieutenant Delgado, Arlington PD. Meanwhile, onlookers continued to watch with bated breath. "Hello, Lieutenant," Amara said quietly. "We have a situation at Beanhaven, Maple Street. I'm being accused of harassment and threats by a woman named—" She paused, then looked at Karen. "Could I have your name, ma'am?" Karen sneered. "Like I'd give my name to you." Amara continued into the phone. "Unknown female suspect is calling in a bogus report. If your patrols respond, could you please let them know I'm on scene?" The cafe erupted in hushed murmurs. Karen's eyes widened, but she quickly masked her surprise with righteous indignation. She had no idea who Amara was calling, but she sensed a shift in the power dynamics. Little did she suspect the monumental revelation that awaited her once the officers arrived. Within 10 minutes, a patrol car pulled up outside Beanhaven, lights swirling. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, scanning the room. Karen visibly relaxed, certain her version of events would be validated. She stepped forward, practically dragging them toward Amara. "That's her. She's been stalking me. She nearly ran me over a couple of days ago, and now she's here, threatening me in public." One officer, Officer Rise, raised an eyebrow and turned to Amara. "Ma'am, could we see some identification, please?" Amara exhaled. This was the moment she'd hoped to avoid, but Karen had forced her hand. She reached inside her blazer, very deliberately, pulling out her FBI badge. "Special Agent in Charge Amara Thompson. I'm with the FBI field office in D.C." Karen's jaw dropped as if unhinged. The sight of the unmistakable gold badge and the crisp identification card made her face blanch. The tension in the cafe soared to an electric pitch. Officer Reyes glanced at the badge, then did a double take. His partner also leaned in. The second officer's eyes widened. "Agent Thompson," he said, his tone respectful. We weren't aware you were." Amara offered a tight smile. "I'm off duty, officers, just here to grab lunch, but I called Lieutenant Delgado too. He's aware of the situation." One of the officers nodded, obviously hesitant. "Yes, ma'am, we just spoke to him. He confirmed your identity." Karen's eyes darted between the officers and Amara. The color was slowly returning to her face, replaced by a flush of indignation and confusion. "FBI? That doesn't change anything," she stammered, though her voice trembled. "She's still threatening me." Officer Rise sighed. "Ma'am, can you specify exactly how she threatened you?" Karen struggled for words. She was standing over me. She has a gun, probably. And she nearly ran me over 2 days ago." Officer Reyes kept his gaze steady. "Ma'am, do you have any witnesses to the near collision?" Karen's nostrils flared. "No, but—" "And here in the cafe, did she say anything threatening?" Karen's lips pressed thin. "She didn't have to." "Look at her," Karen pointed, as if that alone was proof of guilt. The officer's stance hardened. It was clear he'd heard enough. Turning to Amara, he spoke gently. "Agent Thompson, may we ask for a quick statement?" Amara nodded. She explained calmly that she had been sitting, eating lunch, She told them how Karen approached and accused her of wrongdoing, then made the 911 call. Her voice never wavered. She recounted the entire incident, and the cafe manager confirmed her story with a nod when asked. The second officer, Officer Baines, rubbed the back of his neck. "Ma'am," he addressed Karen, "I'm going to ask you to step outside with me, please." Karen looked momentarily panicked, but followed him out. The door closed behind them. The tension inside the cafe eased slightly, though a few patrons still hovered in curiosity. Officer Reyes turned to Amara. "Agent Thompson, do you want to press charges for a false police report or harassment?" Amara considered it. A part of her wanted to hold Karen accountable. This wasn't simply an inconvenience, it was an abuse of the emergency system laced with racist undertones. "Let's see what your partner finds out," she said softly. She wanted to avoid immediate escalation, but she also felt the frustration welling inside her. Outside, Karen was nearly in tears. "I'm telling you, she's dangerous. I saw it in her eyes." Officer Baines' patience was running thin. "Ma'am, your statements aren't matching up with any witnesses. You called 911, claiming she was threatening you, but no one else saw that. We could charge you with making a false police report." Karen's expression contorted in shock. "I'm the victim here. MAAM, the only reason we responded with urgency was your claim that she threatened you. Now you say she didn't speak any direct threats, just that she was looking at you funny. That's not a crime." Karen's face twisted in righteous fury. She was in a black SUV with tinted windows. She could be a criminal. "You don't know," Officer Baines cut her off. "She's an FBI special agent in charge," and the lieutenant confirmed her credentials. "If you continue this, you could be arrested." This threat of arrest for false reporting, or perhaps disorderly conduct, finally doused Karen's bluster. Her eyes filled with tears not of remorse, but of humiliation and thwarted entitlement. I didn't know," she mumbled, voice cracking. Inside the cafe, Officer Reyes and Amara watched through the window. Baines was speaking sternly to Karen, who was now dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Reyes turned back to Amara. "We see these incidents sometimes, though not usually with an FBI agent on the receiving end. I'm sorry for your trouble, ma'am." Amara nodded, mustering a polite response. "Thank you, Officer Reyes. I know it's an all too common scenario for many people who don't have a badge to protect them. It's unfortunate." Reyes gave a sympathetic nod. "Is there anything else we can do for you?" Amara thought for a moment. "I'll wait to see how she acts. If she continues this harassment, I'll consider charges." Outside, Baines returned, leaving Karen standing by her sedan with her dogs. Her shoulders slumped as if a monumental weight had fallen on them. Baines addressed Amara one last time before leaving. "She's free to go for now, but we made it clear she's on thin ice." Amara thanked the officers and watched them depart. The cafe's tension dissipated, customers returning to their drinks and conversations. But Karen remained outside a few moments longer, dogs in tow, staring through the window at Amara with an expression that mingled rage, shame, and a grudging awe. Then she ducked into her car and drove off without another word. Little did either of them know that the consequences of Karen's actions would soon expand beyond this tense standoff. The storm was far from over. Word travels fast in close-knit suburbs. By that evening, rumors about Karen's encounter with an FBI agent at Bean Haven were already circulating. Some neighbors heard about it through social media posts, while others got the news from second-hand sources. Several local business owners who had witnessed or heard about the scene at the cafe chimed in with their own accounts. The story spread like wildfire. Racist Karen calls the cops on a black woman who turns out to be an FBI chief. Karen's phone buzzed incessantly. Texts poured in from curious or concerned acquaintances. She felt besieged, though she dismissed it all as overreaction. In her mind, she was the real victim. She told Brad the entire story the moment he got home, embellishing some details and conveniently omitting others. Brad was appalled. "Karen, you called 911 on an FBI agent?" Karen pursed her lips. "How was I supposed to know she was FBI?" she snapped, ignoring the deeper question of why she had escalated things in the first place. "Did you even think about what you were doing?" Brad pressed. "This could come back to haunt us. You're making us look like, well, like what, Brad?" Karen's eyes flashed with a dangerous mixture of anger and desperation. "Racists," he said softly but firmly. "That's what people are going to say." Karen trembled with indignation. She turned away, arms folded, staring out the window. She didn't respond, but the expression on her face spoke volumes. Shame, fear, and anger swirled in her mind like a storm she didn't know how to calm. For years, her sense of entitlement and prejudice had gone relatively unchecked. Now it felt as though the entire neighborhood was turning against her. She refused to see that her own actions had lit the match. Meanwhile, over at Sharon Thompson's home, Amara recounted the day's events to her mother. Sharon was outraged on Amara's behalf, but tried to focus on the bigger picture. "These folks exist, baby. Don't let them destroy your peace. You know you have the truth on your side." Amara nodded, but the situation weighed heavily on her. She had often handled far more dangerous threats in her career, but those were usually criminals or clear bad actors. This was different, this was personal, and it struck at the heart of the everyday racial profiling and discrimination that black men and women endure. Though she had the privilege of her badge and title, Amara recognized that for many, the outcome could have been tragic. She told her mother that she didn't want to press charges just yet. If Karen kept her distance, that might be enough. But deep down, Amara suspected Karen's meltdown was not a one-off event. People rarely changed so quickly. The fallout began in small ways. Karen's post on the local community forum, once greeted with sympathetic responses, was now flooded with skeptical or outright critical comments. Some people demanded she take the post down and apologize. Others wrote that they'd personally seen Karen harass neighbors and strangers alike. The tide of public opinion turned quickly, and Karen found herself the subject of angry memes, jokes, and pointed criticism. She tried deleting her post, but screenshots were already circulating. Then the local news station picked up the story from social media chatter. A reporter reached out to the Arlington Police Department, seeking comment. All the department disclosed was that an incident had occurred involving a resident calling 911 on an FBI official without legitimate grounds. Suddenly, racist Karen was not just a local scandal, but a broader, cautionary tale. Major social media platforms lit up with commentary on the dangers of living, while Black, referencing the all-too-common trend of white people calling the police on black individuals for mundane activities. Karen had unwittingly become the latest viral example. Karen's phone rang with calls from reporters. She refused to answer. Hate mail landed in her inbox, some of it vicious, some of it merely scolding. For once in her life, Karen felt powerless, the very same powerlessness she had inflicted on others with her baseless accusations. Brad approached her one evening. "We need to talk about this," he said gently. Her eyes flickered with anxiety. I don't know what to do," he sighed. "Maybe you should issue an apology, publicly, on the community forum, maybe even talk to the local reporter. You have to do something." Karen's face darkened. Apologizing meant admitting she was wrong, and she couldn't bring herself to do that. "They're crucifying me. As if I'm the only one who's ever been suspicious of someone who looked like they didn't belong." Brad shook his head. "That's the point, Karen. You singled her out because of her race, whether you realize it or not. It's not just about that SUV or that day in the parking lot. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Brad sank into a chair, exhaling. He had tried to be patient, but his own discomfort grew. He didn't want to be associated with her behavior anymore, yet he felt trapped by the ties of marriage and shared history. While Karen felt the heat of public condemnation, an unexpected figure reached out to her, Margot, the teacher who had been at the dinner party. Margot was known for her empathy and tried to help people see reason. She called Karen and invited her to coffee, away from the public eye, hoping to talk some sense into her. At first, Karen was suspicious, but Margot assured her she only wanted to help. Sitting in a quiet corner of a local diner, Margot gently probed Karen's feelings. "I know you're going through a lot, Karen, but you have to understand that calling the police was a big step, and you had no real evidence." Karen pursed her lips, defensive, but also desperate for a friendly ear. She is intimidating. You know how it is. You see someone you don't recognize and you get worried. Margot sipped her tea. But that's the thing. You recognized her as a threat because she's black, right? And you didn't give her the benefit of the doubt. Karen's cheeks flushed. "I'm not racist," she insisted, a tremor in her voice. "I have black friends." Margot offered a sad smile. "Karen, that phrase is a cliché for a reason. We all have biases. It doesn't make you irredeemably evil, but how you handle it now matters." Karen looked away, stirring her coffee. Slowly, she confessed, "I just felt overshadowed." She was so confident, so poised. "And Margot leaned in. "And that made you feel threatened?" Karen wiped at her eye. "I suppose it did. But I never wanted this to blow up the way it did." Margot reached out, placing a hand over Karen's. "It has. Now you have to make it right." They talked for another hour, Margot trying to persuade Karen to own up to her mistake, to apologize to Amara directly or at least publicly. Karen nodded along, but inside she balked at the idea of public humiliation. She clung to the notion that she was the one wronged, that she'd only acted on her instincts. Still, Margot's words planted a seed of doubt in Karen's hardened heart. Perhaps she had misread the situation. Perhaps she had allowed her biases to run amok. She agreed to think about how she might apologize, although her mind was far from settled on the matter. While Karen wrestled with her conscience, a new problem arose. Brad's company, Titan Software Solutions, prided itself on diversity and inclusion. The firm's HR department caught wind of the social media storm swirling around Karen. As Karen's husband, Brad was being asked uncomfortable questions about his family's alignment with the company's values. At a company mixer, Brad found himself cornered by a couple of colleagues. "Brad," one said diplomatically, "you know we respect your privacy, but this situation with your wife well, it's causing some talk. Our CEO is concerned about how this might reflect on the company." Brad's face flushed. "I'm not my wife. We have separate views on many things." His colleague sighed sympathetically. "I know, but optics matter. The CEO just wants to make sure it doesn't impact the firm's reputation." When Brad relayed this conversation to Karen that evening, she erupted. "So now your job is on the line because of me? That's ridiculous." Brad shook his head. "I'm not fired yet, but it's not good. The CEO is a progressive African-American woman, Elena Sumpter, who has zero tolerance for any whiff of racism. You met her at the last company event, remember?" Karen recalled the polished, confident woman who had introduced herself as CEO. She swallowed hard, feeling the sting of another example of a black woman in a position of power that unsettled her. "This is all so unfair," she muttered. Brad spread his hands helplessly. "Karen, people aren't going to see it that way. You started this. Maybe it's time to own up and issue that public apology. Karen slumped into a chair, staring at the floor. She was cornered. Apologize or face the possibility of her husband losing his job. And that was just one facet of the fallout. She also faced potential legal repercussions if Amara decided to press charges. She agreed, grudgingly, to write a public apology on the same community forum where she had first posted her accusations. But her heart wasn't in it. She saw it as self-preservation, not genuine remorse. Later that night, Karen typed up a post. "To my neighbors and the larger community, I want to address the recent incident involving me and Special Agent Amara Thompson. I realize that my actions caused distress and overshadowed the truth of the situation. I never intended to falsely accuse anyone or act out of racial bias. I was genuinely concerned for my safety. However, I understand that my response was inappropriate. I want to apologize to Agent Thompson and the community for any trouble I caused. I hope we can move forward with understanding and respect." The post garnered immediate attention. Some people praised her for apologizing. Others saw right through the generic language, pointing out that she hadn't admitted any specific wrongdoing or even acknowledged her racism. The debate raged on in the comments section, which Karen soon stopped reading. She felt humiliated enough. Despite the public apology, Karen didn't feel a sense of relief or redemption. In fact, she felt exposed, raw, and angry. She couldn't help but harbor resentment toward Amara for being the catalyst of her downfall. Rationally, she knew she was at fault, but emotionally, she couldn't accept it. A week passed. Karen kept her head down, avoiding local stores and social events. Brad distanced himself, sleeping in the guest room, focusing on damage control at work. The tension in their household was palpable. During that week, Lieutenant Delgado reached out to Amara. He informed her that Karen's call was officially recorded as a false report, but no charges would be filed unless Amara decided otherwise. Delgado asked if Amara might want to meet with Karen in a mediated setting. Sometimes face-to-face conversations could quell these matters better than drawn-out legal battles. At first, Amara hesitated. She didn't owe Karen anything. But she thought of the bigger picture. What if a dialogue could prevent Karen from misusing 9-1 against another innocent person in the future? She agreed. Delgado arranged a meeting at the local precinct. Karen arrived looking frail, her usual bravado diminished. Amara was the picture of professionalism, wearing a tailored suit, her badge displayed, exuding calm authority. They sat in a small conference room with Delgado present as a mediator. Karen's eyes flickered nervously, her voice trembling when she spoke. I want to say I'm sorry," she stammered, wringing her hands. "I overreacted." Amara nodded but remained silent, letting Karen speak her piece. Karen swallowed hard. "I was scared. I saw you as a threat because—" her voice faltered, tears threatening, "because of my own biases. I'm trying to understand that now." Amara's expression softened, but she didn't let her guard down. She responded, her voice steady. "I appreciate that you're acknowledging it. But this isn't just about me. This happens to countless Black Americans who don't have a badge to protect them. You could have ruined my life, or worse, put me in a dangerous situation if officers had arrived primed to see me as a threat." Karen wiped a tear. "I know. I'm so sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want to be that person anymore." Amara took a measured breath. "Words are a start. Actions will prove whether you've changed. I won't file charges this time, but understand, you can't let this happen again." Karen nodded, tears flowing freely now. Delgado observed quietly, relieved that the meeting had remained civil. After a few more exchanges, the meeting concluded. Karen left, face wet with tears, but carrying a small glimmer of hope. Amara walked out feeling somewhat vindicated, albeit emotionally drained. In the days following her tense meeting with Special Agent Amara Thompson, Karen felt as though she were peering over the edge of a vast abyss. Everything she had once taken for granted, her good standing in the community, her sense of moral superiority, her marriage's relative calm, was now in question. It was like she had been living in a tidy little bubble, and someone had burst it from the inside out. During that same week, word reached her about a local community discussion group focusing on racial equity and social justice. Margot, the sympathetic friend who had tried to guide her, mentioned it again and again, until Karen finally relented. She was frightened by the idea of sitting in a circle, admitting her ignorance and her mistakes to complete strangers, but she also sensed that refusing to go would cement her reputation as the neighborhood's unrepentant, racist Karen. The discussion group met in a modest fellowship hall attached to a small church not far from the Fresh Mart where Karen's troubles had begun. On her first evening there, Karen could barely bring herself to step inside. Her palms were slick with sweat, her heart thumped in her ears, and a voice in her head urged her to turn around, drive home, and pretend she'd never arrived. But she forced herself to walk through the doors. Inside, chairs were arranged in a large circle around a table bearing pitchers of water, a plate of cookies, and several boxes of tissues, an ominous sign, Karen thought. About 10 other people were present, diverse in age, background, and ethnicity. They greeted her with cordial nods and soft smiles, though she sensed a reserved caution in some. After all, many in the community had heard rumors about her. The first session began with gentle introductions. Karen felt like her voice was stuck in her throat, but she eventually managed to say, "I'm Karen, and I'm here because I did something I'm ashamed of." Her words emerged in fragments, laced with a tightness in her throat. She refused to meet anyone's gaze, fearing judgment, yet no one laughed, and no one berated her. The group leader, a warm-voiced woman in her 60s, gave Karen an encouraging nod and said, "Thank you for coming." Admitting wrongdoing is the hardest step. Over the next few sessions, Karen listened more than she spoke, trying to absorb the stories others shared. People discussed microaggressions at work, subtle biases in daily life, and the weariness that came from constantly feeling on guard. Some participants described painful childhood experiences, being the only person of color in a classroom, or having a store clerk follow them around because they looked suspicious. Each story pricked at Karen's conscience, forcing her to confront how her own attitudes contributed to that atmosphere of suspicion. At Margot's suggestion, Karen began reading the books recommended by the discussion group, White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, How to Be an Antiracist by Ibram X. Kendi, and other articles the group leader provided. Late at night, after Brad had gone to bed, Karen would sit in the den, dog-eared pages spread across her lap. Each chapter was a mirror that forced her to see herself as she truly was, and it was not a flattering reflection. She realized how her so-called colorblindness was never colorblind at all. She recognized that she had built a mental narrative: there are good people, and then there are suspicious people who need to be monitored, without ever questioning why her definition of suspicious so often defaulted to people of color. Brad watched Karen's metamorphosis with cautious optimism. Although a significant portion of him was still angry and embarrassed, he also couldn't help but notice small changes. Karen was less quick to bark at the television when a news story featured a protest or a crime suspect. She was less eager to browse local message boards for tales of suspicious activity. She seemed quieter, more introspective. In those rare moments when they conversed without tension, he asked how she felt. Karen's eyes would brim with emotion as she tried to explain the guilt warring with the faint. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could learn to be better. There were setbacks. One night, reading a particularly blunt passage about how white entitlement plays out in everyday life, Karen threw the book aside in a rage. She dashed to the bathroom, leaned over the sink, and splashed cold water on her face, trying to breathe through the wave of anger and shame. Part of her wanted to flee back into denial. I'm not a racist. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But another part of her, the part she was gradually learning to listen to, insisted that real change wouldn't happen unless she confronted her own unflattering truths. Meanwhile, across town, Amara returned to her demanding schedule at the FBI. Though the incident with Karen seemed closed, no charges pressed, an apology offered Amara couldn't fully dismiss the lingering unease. Every new story she heard about a person of color being racially profiled brought back that tense moment in the cafe. Amara channeled her frustration into action. She invited local law enforcement to more frequent training sessions at the bureau. She volunteered to give presentations at community centers, speaking on everything from hate crimes to implicit bias, hoping that knowledge might prevent future injustices. While Karen's name never came up publicly, the subtext was clear: the everyday misuse of emergency services to control or intimidate innocent people had to stop. Over time, the scandal that had exploded on social media began to wane. A new uproar, some political scandal or celebrity drama, captured the public's fleeting attention. The area gossip shifted to other topics. Karen was no longer the top headline, but her name still appeared occasionally as a cautionary example of what could happen when prejudice and entitlement converged. Some neighbors avoided her. Others, like Margot, saw her as a work in progress, a flawed person making an honest effort to change. Karen stayed in the racial equity discussion group for several months. She discovered that real growth occurred in moments of deep discomfort, when she dared to ask painful questions, to see the world through someone else's eyes. Little by little, her defenses cracked. She apologized to the group directly for her past snide remarks, for the times she had remained silent in the face of offensive jokes. The group members listened. Some shared their own regrets. Others urged her to keep going, to keep learning, and, most importantly, to act. On the home front, Brad and Karen inched toward rebuilding trust. He saw that she was genuinely trying, even if she sometimes regressed into her old patterns. On a warm spring evening, after a particularly open and tearful conversation, they decided to visit his boss, Elena Sumpter, at a corporate function. Karen, despite her anxiety, told Elena about the equity discussions she'd been attending and asked if there might be a way to share what she was learning with others at Titan Software Solutions. Elena listened carefully, nodding. That moment didn't fix everything, but it was the first time Karen had voluntarily brought up the topic without defensiveness. It was a step toward redemption in Brad's eyes, and possibly a step towards securing his standing with the firm. Although the public frenzy around racist Karen had died down, Karen's internal journey continued in private. She understood now that growth was not a destination, but an ongoing process. The community discussion group members reminded her that unlearning racist behavior was a continuous act of vigilance, an effort that required her to remain self-aware. She practiced pausing whenever she felt that familiar spark of suspicion, asking herself why she felt uneasy, questioning if her discomfort arose from genuine danger or merely ingrained prejudice. Ultimately, Karen realized her transformation was about far more than salvaging her reputation. It was about discovering a new way to exist in the world, one marked by empathy rather than fear, by humility instead of arrogance. She still had plenty of moments when she faltered, sometimes catching herself casting a wary glance at someone who didn't fit her old suburban ideals. But now, she worked to challenge that instinct, reminding herself that one can't possibly understand a stranger's character based on surface-level assumptions. And so, while the heat of public scrutiny had cooled, Karen's personal reckoning continued. For the first time in her life, she was learning to see beyond her own window of privilege, acknowledging how her actions had ripple effects she'd never considered before. She kept reading, kept attending her group, kept speaking carefully with neighbors whom she once dismissed. Maybe she would never completely escape the label of racist Karen, but she hoped her ongoing work would prove one thing: people can change if they're willing to face the darkest parts of themselves and do the hard, unglamorous labor of atonement. And so ends our dramatic tale of how a single, misguided 911 call nearly tore apart one woman's life, only for karma to serve a strong, necessary lesson. Karen's public humiliation forced her to recognize her deep-seated prejudices and set her on a path of introspection and growth. Meanwhile, Special Agent Amara Thompson's composure, along with her professional standing, ensured justice was done without resorting to further vengeance. But the story isn't just about Karen or Amara. It's about all of us and the biases we carry, often without realizing. It's about what happens when fear and entitlement collide with someone else's dignity and right to exist freely. If you found meaning in this story, please show your support, like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Together, let's keep discussions alive about awareness, empathy, and respect, one story at a time.